And welcome to the ThunderCast. I'm Lio Convoy, and joined with me today is number one Marmaduke fan
Hey, thanks for having me on.
and Pelle Creepy / Mark.
Hey, it's good to be here. First time on your show.
All right, so real quick, we're going to go ahead and get started in a bit, but I'm going to go ahead and tweet this all out so all 5 people who watch us can join us.
Yeah, I'll get some promo tweets going too. Try to cast a wider net.
Hey, Lio, I have a totally original theory that no one's ever thought before.
Oh no, do I want to know?
Yes, you do, because it's totally brilliant, and I'm the most brilliant person on the internet for thinking it up.
Oh
So
no.
basically, Thundercats is 100% a copy of He-Man, and there are absolutely no differences. It's a good thing there are no excellent videos on the internet to disprove my totally original and brilliant thesis.
So I was watching Old Yeller the other day, Marmaduke.
Total rip off of Shiloh, by the way. Old Yeller. Yeah.
Maybe so, but I'm making a more tongue-in-cheek statement here.
Should I be worried?
I
Yeah,
don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe you should be. Are there any
In,
wild
in all
hogs around?
in all seriousness, before I get electrocuted, that was a really good video. I liked how you got into mythology and just made like a really interesting contrast between the two shows without bashing on He-Man.
Well, it's because I like He-Man, for one thing. I really do, despite what some people might assume. But I had to do that because I've had so many people that have said that. Now, I have other people who say they've never heard that, and those people are blessed among men. But that video, like editing alone, took me 6 hours, and doing all the research, which to a point was fun because I got to delve into C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and Mort Arthur and all these other things. But it's interesting to look at the literary inspirations for these things.
Yeah.
I mean, even if I wouldn't consider it a ripoff anyway, even all that stuff in your video aside, even if there are similarities between Thundercats and He-Man, quite frankly, Thundercats took everything He-Man did and did it better, in my opinion.
Well, while
we
I
are on the Thundercast. So.
While I
But they both
appreciate
have
it.
swords and big muscles. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and spaceships on fantasy worlds. I mean, that's
Good God, I think
that's the
that
smoking gun.
I think that Thundercats did what it did well, and that He-Man did what it did well. And I try not to compare them simply because they're somewhat divorced in genre, and Thundercats could take more liberties that He-Man couldn't because He-Man came out right after the deregulation, and people were watching it like freaking hawks to find a reason to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And Marm has yet to watch it.
Yeah, I know.
How was that Thundercats versus He-Man comic, by the way? I've been wanting to check that out.
I would rather... Hold on. We don't have any kids in the chat. Okay. I would rather put my dick in a blender than have to go through the entire thing all over again.
Oh, I like the artist. He's the guy who does the Batman TMNT comics.
Yeah, I don't like
I
don't like the artist either.
Okay, well then I guess we're just gonna have to go part ways. Goodbye forever.
You can do the thing where you just pretend there's dialogue in your head if you don't like the story. You just come up with your alternate story.
Well, here's the thing I have to ask: have you been able to check out my series on the comics here on my channel?
Not yet.
I need to check those out. No.
Okay, I haven't done the 6th issue yet because there's something I need to do in real life first, because there's something I'm going to tag onto that video, and I need to make sure that that's ready to go beforehand. But it's terrible. The people who wrote it don't know much about the lore of either series. The art's not anything to write home about because I think that the artist unfortunately uses the action figures that are referenced instead of actual anatomy.
It's what's his name? Well, I know the writer I think is James Tinian, but the artist, gosh, his name is escaping me at the moment. But he does the Batman TMNT books, and I like his stuff. At least on that book.
Well, my biggest
Freddie Williams.
Freddie Williams II. My issue with his art, divorced of anatomy and whatnot, is one thing. Your colorist, if he has to put a white outline on every single character to divorce them from the background, there is a problem here.
That is a thing. So Caldwell is his colorist, and I think he's a very good colorist. But you're right. Freddie Williams' line weight is too thin, and I have seen I actually own the artist special edition of Batman TMNT #1. That's just the line work, And I'm like, what the fuck am I looking at? I can't like discriminate against anything, mid-ground, foreground, background. The colorist, yeah, you're right. He does have to put a white halo around all the characters in order to keep them distinct, which is a fault. Yeah.
Okay.
Did you get a chance to introduce Mark, or did I 100% derail that?
I think I introduced him slightly, but we're going to go into all of his background and whatnot at the very end when we cover his general thoughts. But
Nice.
let's go ahead and get into this. We're going to start with the episode, the Fireballs of Plun-Darr. So let's go ahead and go around the room. Mark, since you are our guest, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this episode first.
All right. Well, so the episode is very simple. It's about the mutants. They've outfitted the propulsion system from their salvaged spaceship into Castle Plun-Darr to launch fireballs, and they're plotting a bombardment of the cat's lair with fireballs. And so Tigra has to team up with Willa of the warrior maidens to infiltrate Castle Plun-Darr and knock out their fireball system, and then Lion-O has to go in and save them both at the end. But it's an episode where it has a simple plot, but they actually wring a lot out of it. It's a good display of the continuity in the show, where it's a direct follow-up to the episode "The Ship Beneath the Sands," where the mutants get their equipment and their ship back from their spaceship that had been destroyed by Mum-Ra in a previous episode from that, in the Unholy Alliance. So it's the show is episodic. Everyone says like, oh, it's just one enemy of the week or one scheme of the week. Like, no, there is a very subtle continuity, and everything builds on what came before, and it kind of led up to this episode. And the next one we're going to talk about is the same way. And so I appreciated that about it. It also had really good animation. I mean, so far my rewatch, the animation's been very consistent since it started. This episode had some really funny highlights, some great nuances in the animation, especially in like the reactions and some very cute anime style faces. Impressed with it. It's not my favorite episode by a wide margin, but I thought it was pretty good.
Well, I've got some fun facts about the animation and everything at the end here when we talk about your viewpoint so far and your rewatch here. But Marm, what are your thoughts on this episode?
I also really appreciated how this one starts in media res, right with the fireballs plummeting down, and you find out later what's going on through flashbacks and character interaction. I've also been really impressed by the consistent quality of the animation. Like there are going to be like scenes where there's like an awkward arm motion or something, and I think people pick on that too much because they're not considering that they're putting their money or their budget in the most exciting scenes. So there are 3 scenes in this episode where the camera is moving along with the characters, which means that the background is fully animated. The first one I noticed is Lion-O drawing his sword, and then it starts really close up on his face and zooms out to show the whole room. Mm-hmm. And again, when he's like jumping down the side of the castle, like they've drawn every little like crack and some stone texture on the side of the building. But that means when it's moving along with them, they're actually animating all of this expressive textures. And they're really brief scenes, but they add a lot of a sense of speed and a rush to the whole adventure. So I really appreciated some of the animation of this one. The anime reactions stuck out to me too. I saw Mark tweeted one of like the minor mutants kind of freaking out at the spider and like trying to like swim away midair. And I think this got mentioned in the documentary I watched ages ago about behind the scenes of it, but they did leave some decisions open to some of the Japanese animators about how to interpret maybe some silent reactions and things like that.
Yeah. In the studio, there was talk to where we'd ask them if they can do XYZ thing, and they would say, yes, absolutely we can. And they had no idea how to do it, so they just do the best they could. And they take a lot of liberties when it comes to some of the things here. In fact, when you look at it, we'll go in depth one day when we actually have a podcast, nothing about anything but the animation. But a lot of the more iconic things with Thundercats were done by the Japanese studio specifically. Because when you look, and I brought this up, I think to Pelle or Mark here earlier this week, when you look at the original promo image of Thundercats with Lion-O and all the others around the cat slayer with Mumra in the background, his sword looks completely different. And that's
I'm glad you pointed that out to me. I had never noticed that before. His sword has holes in
yes.
it.
So
and they mentioned that in the first episode.
Exactly. That's because when Mark Jermicane created the design for the sword, he thought it would function as a giant magnifying glass. But when they turned all the information over to the Japanese studio, Pacific Animation Corporation, to do more detailed work, they came up with the Sword of Omens as we know now. They also came up with what we know as the Cat Slayer and Castle Plun-Darr, because originally the Cat Slayer looked completely different, and I'd love to get into this some other time with images and whatnot. And Castle Plun-Darr was just called the Tower of Evil, and it looks really basic. In fact, you can find images of this in the action figure carrying case that was released by LJN years ago. It comes with a map of Third Earth. I've actually got it framed here in this room, and you'll see where the Japanese design team took it and ran with it. And if you'll notice in the promo image, Wilykat isn't there either. She was added post-production.
Wow.
And I'm glad they redesigned Castle Plun-Darr, because that's one of the best designs of any location in the show. It's such a badass metal looking place.
But do you know where you've seen it before?
So Plun-Darr?
Uh-huh.
It's I know it's an evil opposite of the Cat's Lair, because it's like this winged puma monster.
Well, it's a dragon. But here's the thing: have you ever seen The Last Unicorn?
Yes, I've seen The Last Unicorn. It's a great movie.
Take a look at the Red Bull's clock. Castle Plun-Darr's design. Clock. The design for Castle Plun-Darr is on the Red Bull's clock.
Okay, but what's the order of release? What drew from what?
Last Unicorn.
Came first. Yeah, so Last Unicorn was by I know the history of Pacific Animation. So they used to be Topcraft Animation, and they're the ones who animated Last Unicorn with Rankin Bass.
Correct.
So I guess it was the same animators, because I saw Sugiyuki Kubo's name in the credits on Thundercats. Like, oh, wasn't he like the animation director on The Hobbit and Last Unicorn and those Rankin Bass ones? Yeah.
And he's also the animation director on Naruto and Bleach.
Oh, wow.
Oh, he's still in the business? Wow, all these years later? That's
yes,
amazing. He's still alive?
Absolutely.
Cow.
So,
how old was he when he did The Hobbit? He must have been like 20.
Yeah, he was pretty young from what I understand, but these are the neat things you find out when you really start digging into it. Now, yeah. I really enjoyed the Fireballs of Castle Plun-Darr, because number one, we see more of Tigra, and he's the more soft-spoken of all the characters that are the adults in the show, and it's nice to see him take initiative and do the heroic thing. But as I always do here, I'm going to read out of a book called Hear the Roar. Now, Hear the Roar is an unofficial guide to the original series. Unofficial because, of course, Warner Brothers didn't co-sign on it, but they can eat a dick. Where it goes through all of the individuals involved with the script writing and character designs, and they talk in depth about every episode. So, right here, written by William Overgaard. Perhaps the most obvious comment to make about the Fireballs of Castle Plun-Darr is how very tame it feels, considering its origins as a Bill Overgaard script. While his contributions would usually embellish the Thundercats world with weird and wonderful devices and characters, this outing is remarkably conservative in comparison. On paper, the plot seems pretty straightforward, and from the first few scenes, viewers could have been forgiven for thinking it may have been another rather dull installment. However, Overgaard proves that less can sometimes be more. With the cast stripped down to Tigra and Willa for the majority episode, there are plenty of opportunities to explore the mutants' homes and personalities. This must surely have been the writer's intention, for he succeeds admirably. For the first time in the series, we get a detailed look at the workings of Castle Plun-Darr, and the mutants are for once presented as a relatively menacing threat. We are also, once again, provided a profound insight into the impact of Third Earth and its residents of the warring parties. The torture device inflicted upon Tigra is remarkably brutal as a ticking bomb storylines go. The threat of a senior Thundercat being ripped limb from limb provides more than enough motivation for his fellow teammates to rescue him. The Fireballs of Plun-Darr proves how versatile Bill Overgaard was when writing for Thundercats, and illustrates while it wasn't always easy, his imagination could be confined to work within the boundaries of the series. There are, however, still enough Overguardian touches to identify with. Watch for the great scene where Snarf tries unsuccessfully to predict the coordinates needed for the Thunder Tank's mission, while Panther,
that was cute.
Yeah, while Panther patiently proceeds using his instincts alone. The final scene of the episode is a nice touch, as Panther is revealed to be terrified of Bushy the Spider. From this point on, the series would begin to introduce ever more cringeworthy puns to conclude each episode. That the majority of these tag scenes would feature a certain amount of imaginative wordplay means the producers can just about be forgiven for letting them through. After all, humorous content of the show would be one of its more memorable features. Now, this is also the script editor's commentary. This is from Peter Lawrence. A rather ordinary episode by Bill's standards, and that's what happens when you try to corral a wild talent. Here we tried to get him to write the show and feature our main characters. He did that, and made a pretty good Fist of the Mutants. Sure, he couldn't help himself and incorporated the Warrior Maidens, but by and large, this is a straight-ahead, linear Thundercat story, and one that does not draw much on Bill's imagination and talent. If it's one of the duller of Bill's pieces of the production, and I have to take the blame. Now, just so Mark here knows, Bill Overguard, he's the one that tended to add outside things in the Thundercats. Like, he's the reason characters like Hachiman exist because of his writing. And also, he wrote a movie called Bushido Blade. But what I liked about the episode is, of course, making the mutants more of a threat. I like that they're still showing that Lionel is very young and impetuous and doesn't think anything through, rushing off without the claw shield. And the animation they had in the small skirmishes and, of course, the massive explosions and continuing to show that Monkeyan is an absolute moron is just fantastic to me. I really, really enjoyed this episode.
One of the things that I tweeted about it, but one of the things I really like about the episode, and it's such a small thing but that makes me giddy, is that it shows more mutants.
Yes.
In this episode, there's tons of them all over Castle Plun-Darr, and like they never show them in the series. Like you might see one or two here or there. It almost feels like those are animation errors when they pop up. But this episode is deliberate. They're all over the castle. It's great.
Well, one thing you have to keep in mind is, unlike a lot of other 80s cartoons, as you well know, Thundercats wasn't really developed specifically to sell toys. Toys were an afterthought. They were something the license holder, Leisure Concepts dealt with in the backhand. So they wound up getting phased out overall because they didn't serve a writing purpose, because Thundercats is very writing driven as opposed to toy driven. So the theory I came up with is, well, most of them probably died when their spaceship got literally swallowed by the sand.
Makes sense, yeah.
So, and the rest of them, like, they have no reason to be loyal to Slythe or Monkeyan or Jackal Man, certainly not Vulture Man. So why in the world would they just stay at Castle Plun-Darr and do evil for evil's sake? They probably just went about their business and moved somewhere else.
None of them got arrested at the end of the show when the guy, I haven't watched the episode for years, but when the guy with the circus train who's a bounty hunter, Captain Bragg, thank you. When he arrested the four main mutants, he didn't go after the rest of the mutants. They probably just did what you said. They probably just like left and like went to go like live in the Wolo village or something. Because there's that one really unique design for this one gray, skinny reptilian dude. He appeared like I can't remember which episode, but he's serving. Oh, it was The Trouble with Time, I think it was called. And he's serving stew to the three mutant generals, and they're just talking shit about his food like while he's standing right there.
That episode has one of the best background puns in that scene. I don't know if you caught it or not, though.
So when Monkeyan's like, even a jackal wouldn't eat this food, and Jackal Man's just slurping it down like both hands, like, oh,
Slythe saying that and Monkeyan of all people calling Slythe
chauvinist reptile. I love that. So the episode had such a obviously sexist conceit because it's Slythe saying, Monkeyan, go capture a woman because a woman can make food for us, and Monkeyan's like, you chauvinist reptile. Like it's like they're addressing it. They're very self-aware of the plot point there. It's really clever.
Yeah, they're self-aware in a way that doesn't like wink and nod. Ha look how clever we are. But yeah, do we have any other thoughts about Fireballs of Castle Plun-Darr before we move on to All That Glitters?
I just wanted to add that the light on Tiger's face as the sun is starting to shine on him, I thought that was a great addition because they're literally using sunlight as the ticking time bomb, and it's just a great visual period. You know, it's always interesting when light moves across something and then you see him sweating slightly. It's a nice, like without any words, expressing
he
like the
can't.
fear.
He doesn't get himself out of that trap. It was pure luck that Lion-O showed up. So I mean, he's basically like saying his prayers right there. Like that's the end of Tigra.
Well, thankfully, at least it wouldn't have been drugs.
Yeah, I did watch that episode, The Garden of Delights, where he's just tripping balls that whole episode.
Yeah, they wound up making that a character flaw for him later on in the second season. You find out that he kind of has an addictive nature.
I like that because he's always shown to be like the most intellectual and pensive of all the Thundercats. He's the architect. He has those mind powers he only used once, I think, to create illusions. Like he's so damn smart, but he's not so smart he can't not get addicted to drug after drug after drug.
All right, so now that we discussed Fireballs of Castle Plun-Darr, let's move into All That Glitters, a personal favorite episode of mine, like many are. So, as always, we'll let our guests go first. What are your thoughts on this episode, Mark?
All That Glitters is one that I remember really well from when I watched it as a kid and when I watched it as a teenager, because it has one of those moments where it's like shit just got real. It's one of those episodes when Mum-Ra tricks Lion-O into accidentally attacking Tigra in a dark forest, so he doesn't know it's Tigra, and that's the one thing that you're never supposed to do with the Sword of Omens is attack another Thundercat. And so he breaks the Sword of Omens. And just that scene alone, that the Sword of Omens isn't indestructible, it can be broken and it can potentially be destroyed. You know, that kind of just like changes the game for the whole show. It's like, oh, this MacGuffin that solves all their problems, it's not invincible. And so for the remainder of the episode, Lion-O has to find a way to repair the sword, and he finds out the only way he can do that is to go into a volcano that has a dwarf star at the bottom of it and repair the sword in the heat of the star. But it's too hot for him to go, and he'll die. So he's on a suicide mission, basically, and then all the other Thundercats basically have to stop him from killing himself.
Yeah, it's wild, and it's very multi-layered, and that's what I liked about it. But I'll go into my thoughts here. Marm, your thoughts?
Jaga does not believe in special snowflakes. It's all right kind of parenting style. Like, he just straight up tells Lion-O, you failed. And even when he describes the way to restore the sword, it doesn't sound like Jaga thinks that Lion-O can do it.
Well, in fairness, he's not wrong. Lion-O can't do it.
Right.
Yeah, right? Lion-O's going to kill himself. They have to pull him back from the brink at the end, literally.
This is one of my favorites just for literally pushing them to the edge. Like the pattern in a lot of these episodes has been Lion-O is an enthusiastic kid. And I love that it introduces us to a comedic character where you're kind of laughing at him at how silly he is. And Lion-O is just eager to like help this guy out. And only Snarf has like some suspicion that something's not quite right about all this. There's also like this great twisteroo where the Inflamer, they help the Inflamer, but that doesn't mean that he wants to help him back. So again, it's a dangerous world, and Lion-O keeps getting.
That scene alone is just so weird because the Inflamer seems so like weak and pathetic, and Robert Bill is like vouching for him, like the Inflamer can help you, the Inflamer will fix the sword. And then when the Inflamer fixes the sword and it's like, I've got your sword, Thundercats, come and get it, what's it worth to you? That's when Robert Bill is like, by the way, the Inflamer's a mercenary. Like, oh, you could have told us that 10 minutes ago, you little fucking Ewok.
I noticed a couple. I had a couple animation moments I wanted to call attention to. About 3 minutes in, they do this cool focus shift where it's focusing on the rocky background, and then it shifts to focusing on Snarf and Lion-O talking. I'm guessing that was kind of like a nice animation shortcut, because then they didn't have to animate them talking. They could show, like, they could focus on the background, and the dialogue starts, and then they shift, and then Snarf finishes his sentence. And there's this completely dope scene where the earth cracks and splits apart, and then you see the Thunder Tank flying overhead. It's great because you don't know what's going on at first, and then you realize that you're actually within the earth as the magma comes spilling down on you. That was fantastic.
Oh, yeah. My thoughts are that, again, I like how layered it is, because Mum-Ra is specifically preying on the naivete of the Thundercats, to be trusting and to try to help people, both with Tigra and with Lion-O. He knows that what's going to happen is Lion-O's young. He's going to swing first. He's not going to look before he leaps. And he knows Tigra wants to do right, so he wants to be preemptive here and stop the alleged assailant. Now, how Mumra knew about the curse of Balthus, I have no idea. Never addressed. But that's fine. I'm okay with those little things here. But he preys on our naivete and the one character that can help them. He has handicapped, and then when that person is ready and good to go, he's a complete prick. Everything in this episode was against the Thundercats, and that's what
it's like the hits just keep on coming. It never lets up through the whole episode. It's a gauntlet.
Yes, and here's the interesting thing, right? This is the first time the Sword of Omens breaks, but it breaks a few other times later. And this
had Bengali in those episodes, right?
They have Bengali in one of those episodes. Oh. So here's the kicker about all this, right? We find out, not just in like the Origins books or even in, say, the UK Origins, the Sword of Omens, the sword itself, the physical sword, is just a sword. The Eye of Thundera is its power source. So there are certain things that can destroy the Sword of Omens. I have my own theories in terms of breaking about why it happens. But this one specifically is you have broken a very important rule, and that's you don't use it to attack a Thundercat, because the Sword of Omens is the source of their power. It's so far removed from what you should ever do that the sword literally self-destructs because of it.
Intent doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter if you intended to be defending yourself, because he was defending himself from a masked assailant,
correct,
right? But he isn't being cautious. The Sword of Omens is a powerful weapon, but it's a fragile weapon, and losing it harms the entire Thundercats race. So you have to be very judicious with that power.
The Sword of Omens doesn't care if it's an accident. I mean, if he had actually like sliced Tigra's throat and then found out later, like, oops, sorry, Tigra. You know, the Sword of Omens doesn't care about that. The Sword of Omens just snapped to save Lion-O from making his own stupid mistake.
Correct. And on top of that, intent does matter to a point. And what I mean by that is, if you look, Lion-O swings, and he's swinging to hit him. There are other times later on where the Thundercats are under control, or the chain of loyalty gets broken and they become just kind of rogue, and Lion-O has to defend himself. But the way he does it isn't with literally trying to cut them. It's in other ways that he uses the sword to get around that. So the purpose here is to look before you leap, and that a leader should have better thought processes than to just immediately strike out without question. But on top of that, you see the sword has to be reforged in Starfire. So if you are going to go to the lengths where you are going to make this full decision, there has to be a consequence behind it. It can't just be reforged by Thunderian Blacksmith. No, it has to be reforged in Starfire, because if you are going to make such a grave error, you have to have consequences for it. And sometimes
gotta pay for it, yeah. It was almost too easy when they brought Bengali in, the blacksmith, and he could just fix the sword after, a lunatic or whatever, lunatic broke it. It's like, we don't want to go through all that bullshit with the inflamer again, so let's just bring in.
I think that actually adds to story building here, because again,
it does.
It's the curse of Balthus, whoever or whatever that is. Even here, the roar doesn't give you much detail on it, but this is a consequence. It's not it got damaged in battle. It's you screwed up, and you have to account for it by an impossible task. Kind of like, I guess, Hercules' task after he, murdered his family, but it's less severe.
After he murdered his family,
so we're going to go into...
Oh, can I add one more thing?
Yes, by all means.
Tigra is second in line to be Lord of the Thundercats. That really... I guess because of his age, right? Like, the oldest Thundercat is the presumed leader?
I thought Panthro was the oldest.
No. It has nothing to do with age. It has everything to do with having a leveled head, and in this case, it might be a nod to big cats in general, because while the lion is the king of beasts, Tiger's kind of right next to him, right?
Yeah.
Especially in terms of size. I think the reason why Tiger will be chosen as the next Lord of Thundercats by Lion-O is because he sees him as being level-headed, while Panthro would be my personal choice. Panthro's given to anger very quickly in a lot of situations.
I think Panthro would want to be the Lord of the Thundercats is the thing. I think he'd pass on that.
Or does he want to just build machines in his tank all day?
That is also a point. Yeah. I don't want to do this. Give me my baby. But yes, this is the first time, and let me go ahead and get the image. First time you ever see the Sword of Omens get broken. And this time, unlike the others, it's due to Lion-O's own foolishness. So I'm going to go ahead and go into what is written about it here. Bob Haney's second Thundercat script arcs as a sequel to his debut episode, Lord of the Snows. In this installment, The Thundercats must act to refine and utilize the Thundrillium-rich meteorite that they fought so hard to recover previously. At first, this episode may seem to be a much poorer effort than its predecessor, and the first few scenes lack a little focus. Furthermore, the rather childish moniker Gregory Gregorian only adds to the viewer's reservations. However, Haney's script quickly recovers ground as we see Lion-O and Tigra unwittingly attempt to destroy one another. From this point onwards, Haney provides an enticing and engaging storyline as the consequences of Lion-O and Tigra's hastiness becomes apparent. The idea of destroying the sword is a brilliant one and raises the stakes significantly, something one can only imagine children would have found tremendously exciting. Jaga's scolding, and perhaps overly harsh, attack on Lion-O also makes for brilliant watching. "Yes, Lion-O, gone forever! Because of you!" Once again, Haney proves his experience as a writer. The episode is not only structured perfectly, but the early setup with Cheetara retaining the worthless gold is nicely planted to be used as the story's resolution. While many Thundercat writers could be accused of breaking the Chekhov's gun rule, whereby any device or plot point mentioned early in the story must be resolved by its finale, this cannot be leveled at Haney. By introducing the means to the story's climax at the very beginning, he creates a much more believable and satisfying end to an exciting Thundercats adventure. Another refreshing approach is Haney's telling of the story from the protagonist's point of view. While most episodes would begin with Mum-Ra and the mutants explaining their dastardly plan to the audience, here we are kept entirely in the dark about their trap for the Thundercats. The fact that we aren't expecting the events to follow, any more than Tigra or Lion-O are, gives the episode an added resonance and involvement. A myriad of other enjoyable sequences include a nice focus swap on Lion-O and Snarf arriving at the caves, the sexy scene of Lion-O scooping up Cheetara at the story's end, and the plot twist of the Inflamer double-crossing the Thundercats. There is also an unusual music arrangement whereby Lion-O's call to the Thundercats is mixed with a continuing instrumental music score. While the episode doesn't quite reach legendary status, it comes very close. Now, this is Peter Lawrence's statements as the editor. Bob Haney was somewhat literary, but his story seems to me to have some classical themes. Friend turning on friend, an Othello and Iago moment, the Inflamer, the Sword Forger, could easily be a figure from Greek or Roman or Japanese mythology. He is not a straightforward blacksmith, but represents something more. Of course, I'm perfectly aware that a lot of readers will see this view of Bob's scripts as pretentious. After all, we're discussing a relatively lightweight kids show. Or is it? It certainly seems to have touched an awful lot of people and stayed with them into adulthoods. Perhaps one reason is that it does draw on some wonderful archetypes and myths, courtesy of writers like Bob Haney. And the fact is that all writers draw on all kinds of myths, memories, and archetypes even when they're writing light. Bob, at least, went back to the source. He had read his materials, unlike a lot of the contemporary writers whose experience of life in literature is confined to the TV screen. A personality like Bob could not help but digging into literature, and more power to him. I think this is one of the best written first season scripts, even if there is a bit of pompous here and there. Plus, Bob really exploits the world of the show, its characters, and locations. He does not fall back on outside elements to create his drama and interests.
Nice. I actually noticed the Cheetara scene too, because it's kind of like romance exists, but they kind of know that kids are still at the age where they'll say, "Ooh, gross cooties," right? So they kind of want to just like have it acknowledge that romantic feelings might exist without it ever really becoming like
And
too big.
I think with Lion-O and Cheetara anyway, that would be kind of weird because Lion-O is still technically 12 years old. I mean, his body aged, but his mind didn't. You know, it would look bad. It would reflect badly on Cheetara if she pursued any kind of relationship with Lion-O.
Though it's one of the interesting things is like how does mental aging work? Like I remember Tigra saying he spent 10 galacto years in that chamber, and Lion-O is immature when he comes out of the pod because he hasn't had these life experiences. But I don't know. Is there a sense in which you might age mentally even while you're in this state? It's almost mystical, right?
Well, it is mystical, but the thing is, we see Lion-O grow throughout the series, and most people accept that Lion-O reached at least baseline maturity as an adult right after the anointment trials, and that makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and address Red Vitamin Blue here. I never understood why Mum-Ra immediately took off when the Sword of Omens broke. What a perfect opportunity to attack Lion-O. Well,
Hilarious.
That's one of the foils of being evil. Without the
Like,
Sword of
suckers! I tricked you. See ya.
Without the Sword of Omens as an active threat, it's the only thing that can stop Mum-Ra or even harm him. Mum-Ra would probably want to pick them off at his leisure. Because what could they do to hurt him at that point? What could they do to stop him or end his rule? Nothing. There's also the fact that Mum-Ra does operate on limited time, especially when he's using disguises. So there's a lot of reasons why he could have, but mostly it's probably to make sure, the plot continues on. That and he kind of has a habit of gloating and running away.
He kind of it's 22 minutes to tell your story, and there's a whole lot to unpack and do in that story. So also having Mum-Ra, a fight with Mum-Ra, an excuse for him to leave, that would have just wasted valuable time. And that episode had a lot to do, a lot to get done. Absolutely. So I can understand why they just had Mum-Ra go and like flip them both the bird and then fly off.
He's a dick.
Well, we haven't talked about the gold, which yes. the episode is titled after, and that was kind of like Baby Mark's first lesson in economics, because I remember them because they have this whole thing where they dunk because they're on Third Earth, they're aliens, they're in the future, they're wherever they are. Gold has no value to them, and so the whole joke is just them throwing gold away because it's worthless. And as a kid, thinking that like gold is the most precious substance in the world, and thinking that's crazy. It's only precious because we say it is. It's only valuable because we say it is. If nobody cared about gold anymore, then it would be worthless.
Because of its uses, and then they discover a use for it they didn't know it had.
What I love is Panthro. He's so pragmatic. I don't need this junk. Throw it in the bottomless ravine.
Okay, there was something interesting where he was stretching it.
Yeah.
I was wondering if that was maybe like a lost in translation thing, because gold is a pliable metal, but he's literally like silly puttying it.
Well, you also got to keep in mind, this is the same guy who literally picks up his tank.
Yeah.
See, I thought that too. Like maybe it was Panthro's super strength, but then when Chitara picks it up, she bends the ends of it to form the necklace. So maybe the gold was still a little warm because it had just been like cast off of the Thundrilium.
Yeah. And we know that
they're still a bit pliable.
And we know they have incredible heat resistance, right?
Yeah, they do, which is kind of obvious literally in this episode.
And when he goes into a volcano and doesn't die immediately.
Like the thing is, we say volcano, but it's resting in a volcano. A star is much hotter than a volcano.
Yeah, right.
Like I want a vehicle with the freaking thunder tanks in there. That sucker's sitting there near the surface of a star and it's still going strong.
Oh, my other question, it was about the previous episode, Fireballs of Plun-Darr. I mean, Tiger spends a lot of time underwater without breathing. So, I mean, can they breathe underwater and withstand the heat of a volcano? I mean, how resilient are these guys?
They can breathe in outer space.
Yeah, they can do that too. Okay, well, they're aliens, so yeah.
What I find odd about Tiger in that sense is Tiger can only swim when he has his whip around him and he's invisible. But actual tigers in the wild, they love to swim. So I don't know if that was just a pun because he's a tiger that they gave him that weakness, or if they just didn't know. Either way, I'm amused every time it's brought up.
Can't swim without my whip. Okay, is it buoyant? I don't know.
Clearly it is. If Will was able to grab
it. There's a lot of magical items. Do we find out if their weapons are purely magical or purely technological, apart from the Sword of Omens?
We don't find that out. No, I would imagine they're primarily technological, because Panthro does have other nunchucks, and Tigra has other bolo whips and whatnot. They have an entire war room full with weaponry. So
they show in an episode I just watched, they show Panthro like installing communication devices like inside the weapons so they can talk into him. And he was fighting, I think, like the Crab Man, and the Crab Man broke his whip. And like all these all these crystals came out of his whip, and then the crystals exploded into gas, and that kind of explains how his nunchucks can expel knockout gas.
Yeah.
So I think they're technological.
I love the Crab Men. They're perfect they're so nonsense enemies.
Yep. I love how when the Crabman was introduced, he was just there. He was just there fighting.
I missed the scene. I thought like the episode had like cut out on me for a second because he's just suddenly Panther's fighting a Crabman on the beach. Like, where did that come from?
Look, man, sometimes you just got to fight an enemy crab. That's all it comes down to. As long as you hit its weak point. Okay, so we've had our fun with
I think
that.
I lost you guys.
No, you're still here. I can hear you. Mark?
I'm here. Mark, are you okay?
Oh.
Mark?
I think I can't hear you guys.
We can hear you, but you can't hear us.
I can't believe Mark is dead.
He's gone. Gone. Dang it! I wanted to
Your
ask
voice
him.
is like weird, like electro distorted. Let me leave the call and then come back in.
All right.
That's probably what it is. Discord does that sometimes.
So now now this is just my chance to torture Lio with absurd.
I will break you.
Yeah, cats hate dogs. That's the problem. Well, that's right. The people can't see the profile pic, so they can't see my dog profile pic up against your enraged lion. I think that would make me teasing you that much funnier. Mark, you back?
It's gonna take a minute to kick in if he is.
Oh, okay. I like the format of discussing 2 episodes. I hope we get Couch Boys back soon.
I do too.
It'd be fun.
It depends on our work schedule. But that's why one reason why we're not going through the UK comic right now, because I think she'd appreciate this. Nope, we can't hear you, dude. But can you hear us?
We can't hear you, Mark. Don't want to turn on my camera.
No, I mean unless you want everybody to see you.
Well, no, but yours wouldn't. It wouldn't even like transition to YouTube, would it? YouTube would see me.
I mean, I don't know. I don't actually know. It wouldn't show you at all because I'm the one streaming.
Right, right. Oh, it said you were mute. I saw the mute icon, Mark. Let's see.
Unmote smart.
People can't see what we're typing in Discord. Let's see if there's anyone interested. I'll check the chat while you're chatting with them.
It's all right. Firepaw. The box set is the original series, not the reboot. It just doesn't have any audio on the episode. Man, weird.
Unless Lio secretly finds a way to like make it available or something.
Oh, I will soon. Don't worry.
Nice.
Man, that's weird.
Release
he was doing real well until now.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's just Discord being Discord, creating discord and chaos and disharmony.
Discord conduct. Let's see here. Man, this is unfortunate because we're about to get into the character retrospective, and then we were going to talk about him, and now he deafened himself.
I don't even know how to deafen myself.
You click on the headset icon in the call.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. Technical issues.
Shoot, maybe you'll need to have like Mark on for a special episode.
Well, I mean, I could. I was just hoping he'd be able to stay here longer. I don't know what's going on, man.
Or we'll just like
he deafened himself again.
Contractually obligate him to show up for more episodes so he can tell us about. So for those who don't know, Mark Pellegrini, he writes comics. I think he does a radio show, and he is like a total like cool nerd, right? Like not in like the chic nerd culture kind of way, but he just like knows cool stuff about all of these shows and things. So you should definitely follow his Twitter for like obscure kaiju and like 80s horror movie facts.
I'm gonna go with Firepaw suggestion, see if you can get him to restart the entire Discord app.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Have you tried turning the button off and on?
All right. So until then, let me go ahead and let's get into the up.
He can hear us. Okay.
But we can't hear you. Try talking, man. You might have to check your settings again.
Oh, okay. What if it's under voice settings? So if you go to user settings, you can click input device. So if you reset it, maybe it thinks it needs a different input device than what he's normally using. So like check default, or if you have like a USB microphone like I have, maybe if you just click on that, that might do it. He's
Testing.
done the.
There he is.
Oh, here, yeah, you're back.
Weird. So I don't know what happened. For some reason, it automatically changed my input device to a thing that doesn't exist.
I blame Mum-Ra.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Damn, I don't know what happened there.
Whew.
I blame Mum-Ra.
Alive.
Anyways, we're going to go on now that you're finally back, and we're going to talk about our thoughts on the character Wilykat.
All right, Wilykat.
You first.
Okay. So
Wait,
I
Wiley
actually,
Kid or Wiley Kid or Wiley Cat?
Wilykat, I accidentally mistyped you earlier because you didn't want to talk about Wilykat because we just got done talking about the return.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
well, I mean, I think of Wilykat and Wilykit as kind of like a pair. I mean, I don't recall them ever really going off and doing anything individually, except for maybe the Tower of Traps, which was like a Wilykit focus episode, and Wilykat was kind of worthless in that one. I like them as a pair. I especially like them in their segment in the Anointment Trials 5-parter, where they have to basically Lionel has to outwit a couple of 12-year-olds, and he actually has a lot of trouble doing that, which is kind of funny. But I think individually they don't really have any traits, any real personality, but they work best as a pair. Funny though that they're the same age really as Lion-O, and that never comes up in the show, where they never kind of like feel put off that this guy who was the same age as them suddenly got a big body and now he can boss them around. They never really resent that.
He was their king.
Yeah,
He was their king before, though, right?
Yeah,
he was. I mean, they were nobles too, though. Yeah. And that's the other thing is I don't think the show ever really Thundercats as nobility, like what they did as nobles, what their lineage was. I guess it doesn't matter when their planet blew up, but like how were the Thunder Kittens? How were they nobles? Like where do they rank in Thunderian hierarchy? They never really talked about that.
Well, I mean, I can explain that if you want to go on a side tangent here for a minute.
Please, let's do.
Okay, so the Thunderian nobles that are called the Thundercats, they are the respective leaders of their individual clans, right? So Lion-O is the lord of the Thundercats because lions are the king of beasts.
Yeah.
Wilykat and Wilykit, not only are they small because they're kids, but Wilykat and Wilykit, the cat that they are based on, is a European wild cat, which is only slightly removed from a house cat. So they're basically the leaders of that Thunderian tribe. Or Thunderian.
That's interesting. So why were a couple of kids leaders of their tribe? Did they ever
never addressed
talk about that?
Never addressed.
Okay.
But you need kid characters in a kid's cartoon, they assume. So like Panthuro, he'd be the leader of the leopard tribe, and Chitara, she talks about how she's the pride of her people. Well, that's because she's the figurehead for the cheetah tribe. That's basically how that works out.
Okay. Well, all these interesting character dynamics, and as well written and as interesting as the show was, there's still so many avenues they never really explored.
Oh yeah, a lot of lore they never really went into, and some lore they only went into in the comics, and only very, very little. But there's actually more that I'll go ahead and bring up here. But first, I want to go ahead and get Marmaduke's opinion on Wilykat here.
Sure thing. So I half agree with Mark. I think there is a sense where Wilykit and Wilykat kind of work collectively as a character.
Mm-hmm.
The Powerpuff Girls are kind of collectively a character where, you can point to distinctions between each of the three girls, but they really work best as a unit. That's when they're kind of like, or unless they do like, specific plots where they split up the team and they show like how they have trouble without each other. So while I agree with that, I think most of the distinctions between Wilykit and Wilykat are almost down to like subtextual, like how maybe like small like comments they make or ways they carry themselves. So one that always sticks out in my mind is Wilykit. She'll like dance around and have like this kind of like ballerina grace to her, and Wilykat is kind of like in a parallel to Lion-O. He wants to be a big strong man, and he keeps having like like he has trouble riding his board, but he'll have opportunities where it shines through for him. I can't remember the episode, but I think it's when Monkeyan is chasing them, and like Cat just gets his sister behind him, right? Because it's sort of like instinctively he wants to be between his sister and danger. Mm-hmm. So they are subtle differences, but I think if you look for just like how they behave, almost, or even just like how they move and how they use their bag of tricks, there is a sense where you can start to spot some differences between them, I think.
You're right. I mean, I think I could say more about Wilykit than I could Wilykat. Like as you said, Wily be better than Wilykat at a lot of things, even though the show doesn't really dwell on it. Like you mentioned the hoverboards. Like she took to the hoverboard immediately, while Wilykat was kind of whining that, oh, Panthro must have messed mine up. It's not my fault. He's kind of taking excuses. She's matured maybe a little bit quicker than he has, because girls mature faster than boys is the old additive. But
though in that episode, her board breaks and Wilykat just barely manages to get her, right? Yeah. So he does.
She gets her.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was saying, like, I was just agreeing with you. Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, I want to address Firepaw in the chat. I thought Panthro was a panther, not a jaguar. Okay, taxonomy lesson here. There is no such thing as a panther. Panther is not an actual cat breed or cat species. When we talk about panthers, it's usually one of two things. Either it's a melanistic big cat or it is a mountain lion. Now, Panthro clearly is not a melanistic jaguar, because Jaga is the jaguar. So based on his size in terms of height and the absurd amount of strength he has, he is a melanistic leopard, because pound for pound, the leopard is the strongest of the big cats. That's what Panthro is. Technically, he's a melanistic
That's why he
leopard.
has super strength. That makes... Okay, I never knew that.
Exactly. So that ties in there. Leopards, they're able to haul carcasses 2 or 3 times the size of their bodies up trees. So it's pretty impressive. That's why Panthro's so strong. Now, obviously, there's the tie-in to the fact that black leopard, black panther, therefore he is coded to be a black character, which I think works great for Panthro. Not really sure why they went with blue.
It's one of those things everyone kind of just knew he was black, even though he was gray. Everyone just, in his voice, it was Earl Hyman was his
Earl
voice?
Hyman.
Yeah, he from the Cosby Show. Yeah, so I mean, it's just one of those things where like everybody knew he was black.
Well, I mean, that and kind of like his entire facial structure. I mean, come on.
I mean, he didn't have. It's like Jazz and Blaster from Transformers. Like everybody knew they were the black robots.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right, so going.
But I had a kind of related question, real quick. You can probably just tell me yes or no. I watched the Tower of Traps when I was doing my rewatch of the show recently. Mm-hmm. Does Wilykit ever do that like hairball special attack thing in any other episode?
Yes, she does it in one other episode, but I can't remember what episode that is off the top of my head.
I thought that was awesome because it reminded me, because Felicia from Darkstalkers does the exact same move.
Yep.
As one of her special moves. And I was like, oh, I hope she does that more often, but I couldn't remember her ever doing it again.
No, she only does it, I think, twice in the entire series. Now, my thoughts on Wilykat, I think there are some more obvious distinctions between the two of them. Like, Wilykit tailors her words a bit better. There's specifically one episode where they're sitting around the council table and Linkso's there. And Wilykat says to Linkso, "Wow, you sure are smart for a blind guy." And Wilykit's like, "Why should being blind not make him smart?" He's like, "I didn't mean it like that."
Like, dude, you can't just say that.
It's like, she's more conscientious about things. He's more headstrong about things. She thinks things through. He doesn't. He's the more led by instinct. She's the one more led by thought. And I think that's intentional because, again, girls mature quicker in mind than boys do, and all that stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the character descriptions given in the book. The inseparable twins, Wilykit and Wilykat, which, by the way, they are only in one column, are the junior members of the Thundercats team. Wildly adventurous and prone to mischief, they often feel excluded from their elders' adventures. They appeared in 103 Thundercat episodes, each appearing only once without the other. Debuting in the opening adventure Exodus, the Thunder Kittens were originally envisioned as only one character named Wild Cat later Wilyket. In first descriptions of the character, Linstar wrote, Wilyket is a mischievous and troublemaker, unable to resist pranks, often fouling up the activities of the others, who then have to pull his fat out of the fire. Unlike the drawing of Wilykat, he should be smaller. A feline dead-end kid. I don't get the reference. It's probably something older. Explaining the evolution of the characters in his original note, Starr added, in the original artist rendering, Wilykat was depicted as an adult. Because of the disparity between the Wildcat and the larger cats, I converted him to Wilykat, an adolescent. When Jules Bass felt we needed another female character, I gave him a sibling, Wilyket. Additional comments from the Star to LGA and Toys noted, although their ages are never established, they behave much like unruly teenagers. They are mischievous, disrespectful to the older Thundercats, and though often brought up short by them, they are never totally repentant. They stand about chest high to the other Thundercats. They usually wear crafty expressions, but can often be surly. In combat, however, they are as effective as the other Thundercats, but in their own way. They wear cartridge-type belts containing powders of various sorts. Some produce smoke screens, others contain sneezing and itching powder. Others crystallize into sharp-ended jacks shaped like children's jacks. They release them by spinning in place, the loop of the lariat sometimes rolling above their heads, sometimes down towards their feet so they have to step out of the loop, depending upon whether the target is high or low. Their voices should sound like teenagers. Wilykat does a sort of snickering. Wilyket giggles.
The Dead End Kids were a group of young actors from New York City who appeared in Sidney Kingling's Broadway play Dead End in 1935.
Yep, so definitely dated. Oh my God.
Cut. Okay.
If there's any question about Leonard Starr being an old man, well, there's your evidence.
Like the boomers were wondering about that one.
It's like, oh God, this predates me. This can't be.
Get in the greatest generation here.
So yeah,
so Thundercats had so Captain Bragg, wasn't he a parody of was Groucho Marx, had like a Groucho Marx voice, and Captain Bragg had another like old timey actor like voice impression. So the Thundercats writers liked those.
It wasn't Captain Bragg that had the car. That had
W.C. Fields was the impression.
Yes, it was his bird Cronan that had the Carl or the Marx character.
The Crow was Groucho and Captain Bragg was W.C. Fields. And like no kid, even in '86, knew who those people were. They just knew the voices were funny.
Your best is hopefully kind of knowing Bugs Bunny's impression of it.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
It's like no one knows who Samuel Cleghorn is, but they know who Foghorn Leghorn is. Yeah.
Sometimes the mockery outlives the character. But
exactly.
Anywho, I enjoyed Wilykat as a character. I just wish that they would have fleshed him out a little bit more, especially in the later seasons when they kind of ran into a whole bunch of other characters they were writing for because they couldn't help themselves. But we're going to go ahead now, and we're going to go ahead and talk a bit to Mark here about his background, what he focuses on, how he got back into watching Thundercats, and his thoughts so far on rewatching the series.
I'm not the new kid on the block anymore. It's Mark.
Yeah, let's talk about Mark before his microphone cuts out again. So I write comics and novels. I'm working on my next one right now. I work with Timothy Lim, and some of the comics we've put out are some political parody books like My Hero Macadamia and Wall Might and Thump, The First 100 Days. You don't have to read those if you don't want to. But we've done some comics. We've done Black Hops, USAGI, which is available in stores right now. And we just finished the sequel, Black Hops Hair Trigger, which is also going to be in stores next year. But if you've backed our Indiegogo, you should be getting your copy in like the next 3 weeks. We got the fulfillment done fast on that one. And we're working on our next slew of books for next year. So we're keeping busy. When it comes to Thundercats specifically, I watched it when I was a kid, and it was already in reruns in the early 90s when I was a kid, but it was new to me, so I didn't care. Problem was that I was so young, I could never remember what channel and what time it was on. So I was kind of I got lucky when I saw episodes of Thundercats. I could never keep up with it. I didn't really watch Thundercats like dedicated until it was on Toonami in the late 90s. And then I just like fell right into it. I'm like, oh man, this show is really, really good. And I tried to never miss an episode. I think I only missed a handful of episodes in like the final like season 3 or 4. It's the back end of the series when they started doing the new Thundera arc. And that was the last time I watched it, was when it was on Cartoon Network like 15 or 16 years ago. And then I think just seeing Leo Convoy's avatar on Twitter so much over like the past few months, I was like, I want to watch Thundercats. It's like subliminal. Like I need to watch
I've
Thundercats.
infected you. As I
You
infect
basically,
all.
yeah, right. Now I'm gonna have to go and kill a president of a foreign nation as well because of all these subliminal messages. But I started rewatching it, and I mean, I liked it and I appreciated it when I was a teenager. But I'm watching it now, I guess, a bit more analytically, and I am really impressed with it. From the storytelling, I'm impressed with the continuity of the show. I recalled it as being almost entirely episodic, but I'm watching it now and discovering that there is a very deliberate continuity from episode to episode. That it's only episodic on the surface, and that they have a threat and they defeat that threat in 22 minutes. But everything that happens in one episode builds toward what happens in the next one. There'll be an episode 3 or 4 episodes later that calls back to a plot point from a previous one, and it's very subtle but deliberate. You can't just watch the episodes out of order. I'm also surprised by some of the dark overtones of the show that I didn't notice even when I was a teenager, and that the show acknowledges death a lot, and they aren't shy about it. They just do it tastefully. So, like the episode "The Trouble with Time," where Tigra walks into this cave, and the deeper you walk into the cave, the older you get. And he gets to this point in the cave where there's the cave where he's turned into a bearded old man and he can barely move. And then he looks up and just all around him are the skeletons of people and other creatures that made it only that far into the cave before they got so old they dropped dead. Dark. And just other episodes like Pumra, which acknowledged that all the other Thunderian refugees that were with them in the first episode all just got annihilated and blasted out of space by the mutants. The show hits a lot of darker tones than I recall. Especially, I watched The Ghost Warrior, which is one of my favorite episodes from when I was a kid and from when I was a teenager, and it's one of my favorite episodes now. And it does all this great world building, the history of Jaga and Groon. We get to see the surface of Thundera for the first time in a flashback. It sets up Chitara's sixth sense. It has all this world building mythology in it, but it's all about a dead guy. Who was the renegade Thundercat, who they basically launched off into space and just let him die. And his spirit wound up getting stuck in a tomb on Third Earth that they used like archaic carvings to keep him trapped in there. And I was really impressed that they got away with that on, syndicated animation in the 80s. So I'm really enjoying my rewatch of the show. There's a lot more substance to it than I ever really noticed before. It's an excellent show.
Yeah, and that's again mostly because Thundercats was a story-driven show in terms of the fact that the writers had more freedom than say. I mean, I know you're a Transformer fan as well, so we could look at G1 Transformers as a comparison.
Transformers is a mess compared to Thundercats.
Well, that's because Hasbro, the proprietary, is like, hey, we're putting this toy on the show. Let's put him in the show, but we have no backup. Put him in the show. So it was more driven. Yeah, so you know what I'm getting at. Like Transformers was driven by we need to sell a toy. Thundercats was driven by hey, let's tell a good story.
Exactly, but even with that, I mean, Transformers had just really poor story editing. Like the Constructicons had 3 separate origins that are completely incompatible with each other, and the show just wasn't aware of any of them. Like characters, and like in the second season, like a slew of new Autobots and Decepticons just show up, and they never say where they came from. Like where Thundercats didn't do that. If Thundercats set something down in stone, that was the mythology, and they didn't ignore it. They remembered it. They were very careful with the rules of their world and the history of their world. And if they wanted to introduce new characters, then the characters didn't just show up. Bengali and Pumira and Linkso didn't just walk into Cat's lair and pretend like they'd been there the whole time. They had to do a whole 5-part saga to explain where they came from. The show, Rankin Bass, Jules Rankin and Arthur Bass in general, they took everything they did really seriously, and they always endeavored to make a quality product. Even before Thundercats, and they did those fantasy films like Last Unicorn and The Hobbit, and Return of the King, and The Flight of Dragons.
Yeah, those are great films.
Yeah, but they're fantastic because they have dignity. They know that they're making a fantasy adventure film, so they're not filling those things with pop music. Even like Last Unicorn, which has music by this band called America, the music is tailored to fit the movie and the tone of the movie. It's not like, we have animated films now where it's filled with like Kanye music and shit like that. The movies have a timeless sort of dignity to them, and Thundercats was the evolution from doing all those fantasy films in the 70s and early 80s, and so it has that same sense of dignity. And maybe Thundercats doesn't have quite as much dignity. Thundercats has Snarf in it, after all.
Hey, now.
But Thundercats, I know. I gotta watch what I say about Snarf.
Yeah, you better.
But it does take itself very seriously. Which some people might scoff at because it's a kid's cartoon, but I appreciate that they cared so much about the putting out on the airwaves that they took it that seriously.
Well, I make a contrast a lot between childlike and childish, where something is childlike if it taps into the sense of wonder children have, and something is childish if you're just deliberately being immature for the sake of being immature. So them coming up with these crazy ideas, to me, that's childlike because they're just willing to say, yes, we can have this crazy, pirate crew show up, or we can have this wizard in a flying ship, right? But then they actually care about like trying to work it in and be serious about it so that when the kids grow up, they're still intrigued by this. They're not just feeling like it's a bunch of stupid things. Be quiet, Siri. Quiet, Siri.
One moment. Siri's telling you to hold on. She's telling you to be quiet.
Did you say you were talking about Thundercats? I have some recommendations for you.
Hey Siri, what's the best Thundercats episode?
Here are TV shows matching Thundercats.
Oh my goodness.
Well, she has Thundercats in her lexicon. That means Thundercats is remembered even by Siri.
Oh, God.
Glad you mentioned the episode with Hammerhand. I did want to bring that up for a second because that episode is so funny when you take it into context of Hammerhand's second appearance, where he's dead.
Yeah, he died.
Because at the end of the first episode, Panthro just sinks their ship, and the Thundercats all laugh like, "We've seen the last of Hammerhand. He won't be bothering us for a long time." And then the next time you find out he's dead, they kill him. They just straight up murdered him. And like, that's really fucked up.
But yeah, they tend to be very cognizant about what they were trying to build here, because they weren't just building a random show. But there is one major point of canonic contention with Thundercats, and that's where Hachiman comes from.
Yeah, I remember that. Did he come from the past? Did he come from a different part of Third Earth? Did he come from a different planet? Did he come from a different dimension? Like, where the hell did this guy come from?
Mum-Ra summons Hachiman in the first episode. He shows up the Thundercat real quick. Michael French is a good guy. We disagree about Thundercats, but he's a great guy. I really recommend Retro Blasting. I'm doing a collab with him about Thundercats later this year. But okay.
Are you gonna try to like persuade him?
I mean, I doubt I'll succeed, but I'll at least give him honest points on it. But moving on. In the first episode, Hachiman shows up. They never say where he comes from, really. And all we know is he walked back home somehow. In the second episode, he shows up. It's in the Thundercats 5-parter. And Jaga mentions that he had been returned to his own time, his own dimension. However, he shows up later, and it's mentioned he lives on the planet of the rising sun.
I remember that, and he gets on a mechanical horse, and he rides across space through his horse to get to New Thundera, right? Is that how that happened?
And he is so hardcore, he chokes out Mamut.
He didn't screw around, yeah. I remember in it was one of the Wildstorm Thundercats comics. I don't know how. I'd rather not consider most of those to be canonical, but they showed him living on a different part of Thundera.
Well, he
on
traveled.
Third Earth, I mean.
Well, no, he traveled. He traveled to New Thundera to get an elixir for his father or some plant to help him heal.
Oh yeah.
But some other fun things about Hachiman is he's as old as Mum-Ra is. And he's also the only heroic character in the entire series Mum-Ra is terrified of.
Including even like the wizards like Wizra. Like Mum-Ra seems to get the upper hand of Wizra.
Yeah, but
Mum-Rana, right? Who's supposed to be Mum-Ra's like evil opposite or good opposite. I'm sorry.
Yeah. He's not scared of her.
But he's scared of Hachiman. Oh no.
Because when Hachiman shows up, because Hachiman, the last time they fought, he just says, "You know me, bad man. I am Hachiman." And the first thing he does is rush to try to kill Mum-Ra. When Hachiman shows up, it's because he's got work to do, and he's a samurai, and he doesn't dick around. I mean, the very first episode, when he cuts down the tree, or he uses the tree as a slingshot to knock Slythe out of the Sky Cutter, his first instinct is to kill Slythe. He doesn't think past that. So he's a really interesting character. He's actually the first one we covered on the ThunderCast, but I'm not going to delve too much deeper into him as a whole.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought him up, though. Yeah. Oh, go on, Armadude.
I was just going to say, it raises the question, if Mum-Ra is afraid of Hachiman, does that mean that, the Sword of Omens is obviously a powerful weapon, but do you not need the Sword of Omens to kill Mum-Ra? Could maybe like a good and brave and true warrior kill Mum-Ra?
Well, you can't.
Based on like the quality of their soul?
The thing is, you can't kill Mum-Ra. Because
it's like, so long as evil exists, Mum-Ra lives, so he's pretty much unstoppable.
However, he still feels pain.
Yeah.
And regardless of how immortal you are, it's kind of like the Wolverine situation. No, he can heal from anything, but he still feels it. Like, I had this ongoing joke about Harry Potter. It's like, sure, this guy, he's all but immortal, but I guarantee you throw him through a wood chipper once, he's not going to dick with you again. And I think it's that in Hachiman's favor, because a samurai tends to be dedicated to taking out his target, and if his target's immortal, he's just going to keep coming back.
I thought Hachiman was cool because he had the Thunder Cutter, which was like, it's almost as powerful as the Sword of Omens, but it's like his own thing. Like, there's the Sword of Omens that's with the Thundercats, it's Thundarian, it's unique to them. Yes. But there are other swords and other artifacts unique to other cultures across wherever the fuck Hachiman is from that could be just as powerful as the Sword of Omens, and they're unique to them. So the Sword of Omens isn't necessarily the most powerful MacGuffin in the universe. There are other people with things like that.
Well, I think the Sword of Omens is the most powerful MacGuffin, for lack of a better word, but that's mostly because I'd imagine it's the one that has the most show to it. The Thunder Cutter is powerful in its own right in the way it operates, because it operates also outside of Hachiman. It can fly around and do whatever it wants to. Sometimes the Sword of Omens does that, but we're getting on to more of Hachiman, and we can revisit him later, because he is a fascinating character. But one thing I do want you to point out, if you ever get the chance to, you need to watch my video on Snarf, Mark. You need to.
Okay. I need to appreciate. I mean, I don't hate Snarf. It's just kind of fun to pick on just because he's Snarf. But yeah, I do need to be schooled on Snarf. I suppose.
I'll give you a TLDR here real quick. Snarf's purpose wasn't to entertain you as a kid. Snarf's purpose was to be the representation of your parents in that show.
The Killjoy, yeah.
Well, not just the Killjoy. It's like when I sat there and watched ThunderCast with my mom, and their line was going to do something dangerous, and Snarf says, "Oh, yeah, that sounds kind of dangerous." She's like, "Yeah, he makes sense. Why doesn't anybody listen to him?" That's Snarf's purpose, right? He's supposed to be the parent, which is what your parents are supposed to identify with. They're not going to identify with Lino. They are adults. They're not going to identify with Panther. They get angry at work. They identify with Snarf because Snarf's the only one with common sense in that entire show.
Yeah, he's the one who doesn't get any appreciation. He even does it in the first episode where he's trying to bring Lino the Sword of Omens, and Lino's like, "Another toy? Get the hell out of here, fucking Snarf." And he's trying to save the day because he knows what he's doing, but Lino won't listen to him. And
Snarf literally puts himself between death and Lino in that episode.
Yeah.
Unless is that in the deleted scene, or did that make the final cut?
That's in the final cut.
Okay.
But
I like Snarf. It's Snarfer who I don't like. We discussed this before we went on live. Yes. We're like, Snarfer.
Okay.
No.
How do you feel about Scrappy Doo? I feel like I'm the only person on the internet who doesn't hate Scrappy Doo sometimes.
We don't talk about Scrappy Doo.
I liked Scrappy when I was a kid. I actually liked Scrappy, and so we used to get Scooby-Doo chewable vitamins.
Right.
That was how long ago this was, and my brother and I would fight over who got to have the Scrappy vitamin, because Scrappy was the cool character. It was the stupid things siblings fight over. But yeah, I liked Scrappy as a kid. If I watch Scooby-Doo stuff now, there are two different types of Scrappies. There's the early Scrappy, where I think he even had a different voice. It was like Lenny Weinreib or something, but it's the one where he's like, "I'll get him, Uncle Scoob. I'll splat him. Da 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 da, puppy power," and he's just obnoxious. But then there's like a mellower Scrappy from like the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, and from those like Red Shirt Shaggy movies like Boo Brothers and Ghoul School, where he's mellower. He's not doing that like puppy power bullshit. He's just kind of he has a the level head, whereas Shaggy and Scooby are always like flipping out. That's a good Scrappy. I like that.
He's really
Scrappy.
just their enforcer, because Scrappy and Scooby, they're really important, but they're kind of comedic cowards, and Scrappy's just the one who kind of like is the get things done aspect of the team. He's basically kind of serving the role that the rest of the gang uses. We have totally commandeered this Thundercats.
Clearly,
That
freaking
happened.
dog lovers. Anyways, real quick, Mark, because you're a Ninja Turtle historian and you're big on the Ghostbusters, I have to ask, compared to those two shows from the 80s, how do you think Thundercats compares?
Well, so obviously Thundercats wipes the floor with Ninja Turtles. I reviewed every episode of the 80s Ninja Turtles cartoon. You can find it on my website, TMNT Entity, if you so dare. That show is an absolute mess. I mean, that's part of the reason I like it. It's kind of like if Thundercats is Lord of the Rings, Ninja Turtles is your Hunter of the Future. It's like reference. A B movie compared to this like A-list Hollywood movie. So Ninja Turtles doesn't really compete. It's its own thing. Ninja Turtles is almost like a spoof. Real Ghostbusters, it's a wall in quality somewhere around like season 3 and 4, and then it's just a rapid decline downhill, both in terms of animation and writing. Real Ghostbusters, though, was a truly episodic show. There is no continuity in Real Ghostbusters, even during its prime. And that's actually one of its strengths, is that every episode is something brand new, a brand new antagonist, a brand new plot. There's no baggage of continuity to it. It feels very fresh. Animal from what Thundercats is, whereas Thundercats is a fantasy epic in a way. Not in a way, I guess it is. It's 130 episodes with an ongoing plot, and it feels complete. It has a very strong opening. It has story arcs, especially towards the final seasons, where they do like the Treasure of Thundera arc, and they do the Resettling New Thundera arc, and then it has a conclusion that sews up all of its storylines and ends the series. It was not like that at all. Real Ghostbusters was just an open-ended episodic series. I think both are fantastic for what they do. I think they're probably both the best examples of those kinds of shows. I think Real Ghostbusters is the best example of an episodic series, and Thundercats is arguably the best example of its era of a serialized, ongoing action-adventure show.
We've got to sit down and talk about Ghostbusters sometime, because I really do adore a Real Ghostbusters cartoon.
I mean, I'd love to. I could talk for days about Real Ghostbusters. You kidding?
But yeah, all right. So now we're winding down the stream, and we need to talk about what we're going to discuss next month. And just so you're aware, Mark, I open the invitation for you to join us anytime we do a ThunderCast.
Absolutely. Just tell me when.
Every month. We do it once a month. We usually aim for the second Thursday of every month, but we got a little bit off schedule here because of people's conflicting schedules, including mine. So that's usually when it is. It's the second Thursday of every month.
I can do that.
Killer. We'd love to have you, but we need to decide now what villain we're going to cover next time. Because we covered hero, villain.
Just so I know who not to pick.
That's a sticky question.
Yeah, I keep forgetting because we've done like 21 episodes by now, but we have
Well, could we do Inflamer, since we may not get a chance to like we'll forget about him if we don't do him, since we just talked about the episode that he's in last time this episode.
What do you think, Mark?
We could do Inflamer.
Sure.
For flamers, do ya? Oh, I had to do that joke. Give me a break.
We got Thump in the chat, by the way.
Oh, hey.
What's going on?
What you doing in my waters? Ooh, the next two episodes are also really good episodes. Two of my favorites. You got Spitting Image and Mongor.
Oh, damn. So those are two episodes that are near and dear to my heart, because I had a Betamax tape of Spitting Image as a kid.
Wow.
And for the longest time, that was the only Thundercats episode I could really watch because I didn't know when it came on TV. And Mongor is one of my favorites just because that's like one of the best one-shot villains in the show. So, that's a good...
Oh, here's the fun thing about that VHS or Betamax tape. The art on the front, like I didn't notice until I became older and actually got to look at a lot of the background stuff. It's just two different poses from Panthro's model sheet.
that out to me on Twitter, and I was
Yeah.
like, wow. I mean, obviously that's what it is, but they did a really good job of making it not look like that's what it is. If
Oh
you
no,
hadn't
the
pointed
the
it
art
out, I'd have
the
never
artist
known.
for that did a fantastic job in composition, so it wasn't anywhere near as well. I won't say it wasn't noticeable, but the background drew away from it so well that it just
Yeah, the
it's,
mummer on the background.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's a great cover. Granted, there are some other weirder ones like the Poomra VHS cover. It's so strange because it's obvious the artist is independent and doesn't really know much about Thundercats, hence the black flaming eye and Mumra's tomb being a serpent head for some reason. But somebody's actually selling a poster of that. I need to pick up like an official one. But before we go any further, thank you all for joining me. I'd like to give a thank to Comic Basics for supporting the Thundercast, as well as a thank you to my patrons, Avis, Hateful Tate, Harry Partridge, Norden, Riddle of Lightning. All of you, I would like to give you a fantastic thanks, as well as Busy Robot Hands. Didn't forget you. And if you guys want to support me, you know where Patreon is, and you're welcome to follow me on Twitter and see the type of nonsense I get into. Thank you again to Marmaduke and to Pelle Creepy. Please follow them on Twitter, and if they have respective YouTube channels, go ahead and pass me yours, Mark, and I'll throw it in the description for everybody.
Oh yeah, we are. What the hell's the name of our our YouTube channel? We've been streaming all the time. It's the Bunderdome.
Oh my God.
Yep, Bunderdome, the Bunderdome.
Also, don't think I didn't notice USAGI. I caught that a mile away.
We apologize for nothing.
I mean, I'm an avid reader of Usagi Yojimbo, so.
So, real quick, funny story about that. When Tim and I published USAGI, originally that was going to be the title, just USAGI, because it's about a military rabbit that goes into North Korea to stop a nuclear launch. But our publisher, Antarctic Press, the Dunn brothers who own Antarctic Press are friends with Stan Sakai, the creator of Usagi Yojimbo. And they said, like, well, let's just be friendly about it and ask if Stan Sakai is okay with us having a book titled USAGI that's going to be on the stands next to his book, Usagi Yojimbo. And they talked to Stan, and Stan politely but firmly asked if we could adjust the title. So within 5 seconds, Tim was like, Mark, this is going to print in 10 minutes. You need to come up with a new title now.
Oh.
And I was like, I came up with like all these stupid things. And one of the ones I blurted out was Black Hops. No, wait, that's retarded. Don't use that one. It's like, too late, Mark. It's already being printed.
Well, I mean, at least you didn't go for American Rabbit.
Yeah, the Adventures of the American Rabbit. Yeah, like
which you guys had never heard of. That's what blew my mind. Is you'd like touch like this deep, like repressed 2-year-old memory of mine. I thought, did they just do their own version of the American Rabbit? You guys had never heard of it.
No, I had never seen it either. And then you told me, and all of a sudden, like, wow, that's like an 80s straight-to-video animated film that I had somehow never seen as a kid.
It's okay that you didn't see it.
It's terrible, so I dodged a bullet on that one.
Oh, absolutely. But I'm going to go ahead and give the chat a couple minutes if they have any questions, comments, or concerns. Oh, I need to answer the question earlier from Red Vitamin Blue. I saw on Entertainment Earth the Thundercat figures will be available June 2020. Does this mean Super 7 pushed back the release, originally spring 2020? Haven't heard anything from Super 7. No, that's probably Entertainment Earth giving themselves enough room, because Super 7's never on time with what they produce.
I'm interested in their Ninja Turtles stuff they've got going on. It's just really expensive and kind of redundant with NECA's Toon Turtle stuff. So I'm probably going to pick and choose the Super 7 Turtle stuff that comes out.
I'd recommend Big Bad
but
Toy
they do
Store.
make great stuff.
They kind of make good stuff. Their quality control on the He-Man line's been absolute trash.
I'm too poor for this conversation.
No, you're not. Yes, Bunderdome. I have seen that He-Man video game. It just doesn't quite appeal to me. I like Thundercats, and as such, I think it needs to be a more divorced from Motu. That a lot of people try to stick them in the same room, and I don't think they quite fit. I especially don't like the fact that Super 7's basically using the Motu bucks for Thundercats. I'm tired of people treating it like a stepkid. And yes, Vinkman, I am going to do more Deception of a Generation videos. It's just Star Wars is the next thing up, and I do need to at some point sit down with Marmaduke here because he's going to help me with that because he's a Star Wars nerd. And sit down, script it out, and get it out. I do want to finish that series out. I've just been so backlogged with other things. Just like I need to get out that last issue for the Thundercats He-Man crossover. It's going to be a whole thing. It's just going to take me a little bit more time to get to that. And hopefully not this coming Saturday, but the next one, because this coming Saturday I'll be at TFCon. So I won't be able to do any videos next week. But hopefully the week after that I'll be able to sit down with Marmaduke and have him suffer with me in the Deception of a Generation video about Star Wars, where they tell you that Darth Vader looks just like the Norse god Woden.
That'll be interesting.
If you ever want to talk about Boba Fett, Marmaduke.
Woden
talk
only
about
has one
Boba
eye.
Fett.
Nice.
Yes, Woden looks nothing like Darth Vader, but they claim that he's based on him. It looks just like him.
God, was that the name? What was the name of that documentary that ran on like the History Channel? That was so reaching. I think that's where that came from, right? Where
it came from The Eagle's Nest, a Christian television show in the 80s called Deception of a Generation, based on Phil Phillips' book Turmoil in the Toy Box.
Yeah.
All right, so that's something I'm thinking of. This like documentary they ran on the History Channel like 10 years ago, where they just compared like Star Wars to all these like pieces of literature and mythology, and they were reaching super hard for a lot of their comparisons.
I mean, wouldn't it just be Akira Kurosawa's The Castle?
It's kind of like Akira Kurosawa and Flash Gordon, you know, that's kind of like all you really need to know. But evidently
and John Carter Mars and probably Jack Kirby. Tolkien would be mad at all of us for simplifying storytelling that much.
That's all right. It's all right. I'm more of a C.S. Lewis fan myself.
What do you mean the Wookiee language isn't a real language? How lazy are you?
I want every phonetic of it to reinforce the style of the culture.
Oh my goodness, that man put a lot of thought into his stuff, and I kind of miss people doing that.
It's for Star Trek. We're talking Star Wars here.
Oh my god, no, we don't talk about Star Trek on here. No, none of that. No more. Anyways, you guys have a good night. Thank you for joining me, and I hope we'll see you guys next month.
Catch you later.